Where are you guys right now?
We are at my house in Los Angeles. We both moved out here 9-ish years ago, 8-9 years ago.
Let me start by asking you this, because I had Weethan on not too long ago, and I had sort of premised a lot of my questions to him in sort of a Chicago framework. And then as we were talking, I sort of slowly realized that he was sort of too young when his career started blowing up to have ever really even gone out in Chicago before he kind of became the artist that we now know. I always associate you guys strongly with Chicago, but I'm curious, coming up, because you guys also started somewhat young when people started picking up what you were doing. Did you feel a strong connection to the city, or was it more of kind of like an online community that was really turning you on at the start?
Yeah, so it was pretty similar. We didn't play a lot in Chicago or even go to many nightclub shows or nightlife events because we were in high school, and I don't know. I didn't have a fake, so I wasn't rolling around like getting into.
I never places. Had one.
But we did play a few like late night club shows, even at a young age, like underage, and it was always a lot of fun. But then it was also always trouble too. Like they'd be like, okay, you can play your set, and then you have to get out right away. Like you cannot stay any longer. Like even though you're the DJ, they're kicking you out right away and stuff like that. So a lot of our time was spent focused on like the internet, building the internet. But Chicago as a city, definitely we're very connected to, and went downtown a lot and spent a lot of time in different parts of the city. I lived in Lincoln Park for a year before I moved out here. So, and I grew up skateboarding and going down to the city and skating around downtown. So yeah, definitely very connected to the music history in Chicago and the city itself. And, but we didn't have too much experience going out in the nightclub or nightlife kind of when we were there.
Yeah, I do feel like around was it like the summer of 2015 or so that we had that studio with Win and Woo, and
I think
or summer of 2016. I feel like around probably 2015, 2016, we started hanging a lot with like Weethan and Win and Woo and had a studio that we all worked out of. And I feel like at that point we started to kind of feel this like little community of artists that we were working with and hanging out with. But yeah, we weren't like going to the mid, every weekend.
I love anyone who remembers that era, because it was just a special time. Whether you were going out there or not, it really felt like something was going on in the city. And it's interesting now because I feel like Chicago, I don't know if I'd say it's slept on for talent in the scene, but it does feel like there's more going on than gets noticed sometimes. Like I think other cities overshadow it a little bit.
Yeah, no, there's definitely still a big community of like bass music and dance music out there. I know a few artists that are going to be living there, and I think Hamdi's moving to Chicago.
Oh, is he really?
I think so. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's going to be a cool little.
Liney lives there. Levity's there.
It's going to be a bass scene there. Continuing.
That's right. That's cool, man. That's like, well, so that makes me want to ask you guys, because it's interesting, like how different communities form in different cities, like different scenes sort of bubble up over time. When you guys moved out to LA, what was the vibe there? What was going on in the city? Like, because I'm sure you've seen it change a bit in the time you've been there.
I feel like when we first came out here, that was still kind of like somewhat early in like Brownies and Lemonade days of like B&L really still being like a little more underground. So there was a lot of like, our SoundCloud homies coming and playing at B&L all the time. And then also I feel like when we first came out here, we were just like writing a lot with like songwriters. And that was like something that we didn't have in Chicago was like a huge swath of, really great songwriters that are just like writing every day. But I feel like LA's so big and there's so many people doing music that it doesn't feel as much like there's so much of like there's a scene, in the way that like maybe Chicago felt like there was like this group of people that you see at all the shows or that are all making music, that are all playing the North Coast and Spring Awakenings and stuff. I feel like out here it's a bit more saturated, but you have like the various levels of, talent and success that you don't, there's higher levels of like talent and success in LA than there are in like Chicago.
Sure. Yeah. Which makes sense. I mean, yeah, there's that like ceiling I think you hit in a lot of cities where you feel like you kind of have to make a move to get to whatever that next level you're trying to get to is. And in LA, I mean, there's stuff like Space Yacht or, a few other recurring, obviously like Brownies and Lemonade do great stuff out there. So I think to me, I feel like there are some of those communities, but you're right that LA is sort of I don't know where you go after LA. Like that's just where everybody ends up eventually, right?
Yeah.
Do you think now that you've been there for a while, do you think you'd ever leave?
Definitely.
We definitely want to get back to Chicago at some point, but yeah, it's kind of hard to imagine leaving just yet. But yeah, it'd be nice to get back there sometime.
Yeah, I hear you, man. I moved away a long time ago too. I miss it, man. It's still probably my favorite place I've ever lived.
Such a special place for sure.
It really is, man. And I mean, for you guys, like you met there, were you both teenagers when you first met there?
Yeah, we were both, I think when we first met, I was like towards the end of my freshman year of high school and Freddie was towards the end of his 8th grade year. And we kind of met through some mutual friends at a Madeon concert. And then we were in the same like Facebook group with a bunch of other kids at our school that were like really interested in electronic music. This is like 2011, 2012 time where like, the US kind of boom is really starting to happen. But I feel like the people that were in this Facebook group were like the few kids at our school that were really staying on top of what was going on and paying attention to new artists that were coming out. And like, I remember we all like
subgenres.
Yeah. We all like pooled our money together to like get a Nest HQ subscription back when that was a thing.
Yeah.
And we both Fred and I each had like little, like solo projects going on where Freddie was producing his own music, like mostly like dubstep. And I was making mashups that were like kind of more like cap slap, blow type, like EDM mashups. And I think Freddie originally like heard of me because I entered a contest to play the first Spring Awakening. And I got all these kids at our school to vote for me. And then he just reached out one day on Facebook and was like, hey, like, do you want to get together someday and like, make some music? You could kind of teach me to DJ. I could teach you to produce. And I remember Fred had posted something on Facebook, like I just made this and it was like a 40-second idea or something. And I thought it was like the coolest sounding thing ever. Like I was like, this is so sick. Like I gotta go hang out with this kid, right. Like let's work on this thing that you just posted. Like this is cool.
Did it feel like at the time, like you had this Facebook group, but in your school, did it still feel like kind of like a weird niche interest, or was this past the point where like every kid in high school knew what EDM was, listened to it to some extent?
There was like levels to it. Like the kids were they were playing like Animals by Martin Garrix when that came out. So it was big enough to the point where, they're playing at parties. But like me and one of my buddies, Adam, we were like super dubstep heads at the time. And they would, be like, play songs with lyrics and like, say, give us, make jokes and stuff. And, but it was all fun. but yeah, I was, I remember even like in 6th grade, like having parties with a few friends and like bringing my speakers over, that my dad's like huge speakers, and just like hiding my laptop in the corner and only playing dubstep, and like it was a fun time. But yeah, no, it definitely was something that I was like more interested in than others, but still everyone went to Lollapalooza. Not everyone, but it was like a large amount of kids that I knew were going to Lollapalooza and seeing all these artists, and they were part of the culture of, especially with like Lollapalooza. There's so many different styles and so many different like subgenres and subcultures of just music fandom. So you're kind of exposed to a lot of stuff just going to Lollapalooza and stuff.
Lolla's the best, man. It's still to this day, I think probably my favorite festival in the country. There's just something, maybe it's the nostalgic thing of like, being next to the lake with the buildings on the other side, but you can't beat it, man.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the best. I mean, for you guys, even the interest to get involved with dance music at all, if we go even a little further back than that, like, do you remember when you first heard it? Did somebody turn you onto it? Did a particular song spark your brain?
First for me was Daft Punk, and I think that was through Kanye West, because I was like a huge Kanye fan, and with like Stronger, read into the story about Daft Punk and Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, and my dad had already been like a fan of them, so
he saw them at Coachella.
Yeah, he saw live 2007 at Coachella.
Legendary, yeah,
right, and so I was a fan of them, and then once I think on a trip to Italy, I heard some song on the radio that it was like a Zito de Bass, but the Timo Mas remix.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Huge song, yeah.
Of the womp womp womp.
You heard it on the radio?
Wompy era, but I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like, I've never heard a sound like that before, and then that kind of sent me a little bit further, and I was talking to some camp counselors, and they showed me Caspa and Rusko, and so I was like 12 or 13 and just like super dubstep head after that.
12 or 13 is about the right age to get heavily into dubstep.
Oh yeah.
For me, I feel like the first time that I can remember hearing any sort of like electronic music was when I was maybe in like 5th or 6th grade. In like gym class, we had like a dance unit, where like you get put together with some kids and you pick a song and you had to do a dance to it. And there were some kids in like the grade above me or 2 grades above me that did a dance, like in hindsight, like a wildly inappropriate dance for 4 guys to be doing to Satisfaction by Benny Benassi.
Oh yeah, I can almost picture the dance. Yeah,
yeah. And I just remember hearing that vocal and being like, "What is this? This is so weird, but like it's kind of catchy." And I remember listening to that a little and then not really thinking much of it. But then there was one day where I was at one of my friends' houses in like maybe 7th or 8th grade, and his older brother was taking a shower, and he had this huge speaker, and he was always blasting music, and he was playing I Can't Stop by Flux Pavilion. And I swear he had just had it on loop, because it felt like it was just going on for like 30 minutes straight. I can't stop. And we were like, what is this? This sounds so weird, but like it's kind of cool. And I remember Shazamming it and then like downloading it and then like longboarding around town, just like blasting it in my earbuds, and then talking to my sister about it. And she was like, I know Flux Pavilion. Like, you should check out this song Gold Dust, and you should check out this other thing. And, I remember when my sister sent me Levels by Avicii for the first time and just being obsessed with that. But I feel like I count I Can't Stop as like that's like the first one to me.
Yeah, there's something about those first moments, especially when you're hearing something so much for the first time. Like hearing a Flux Pavilion song for the first time with no context of like what dubstep is or who he is or any of that is such an insane experience. And I think it's those, at least for me, those little moments that are so addictive at the start that you end up chasing later on. Like, yeah. And I'm always obsessed with this idea of trying to find those moments again. Like, is there anything, when's the last time you felt a moment like that of just complete mind blown? What is this? I need to know everything about this. Because I think as you go on and on, especially as it becomes your career and you're participating in it, making music yourself, I think those moments are harder and harder to find, man.
Definitely. But I think like when you find a new like subgenre or new like pocket of artists that do it just a slightly different way, you can still have little moments of like, oh my gosh, it's a whole different like mindset of music creation, or like, oh my gosh, this is like that happened. That's happened to me a few times with the speed house stuff coming out of like Berlin and and just kind of how that's influencing like dance music right now. And also like when Skrillex put out his latest stuff was definitely another moment where he really changed things up and kept it fresh and like made a kind of a new version of Skrillex in a cool way.
You're kind of right. I think it's
especially was that like that felt like totally. Oh, I haven't really heard something like this.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's so at the start, you don't know anything, right? So the first time you hear it is just mind blowing because you didn't even know it existed. And then later on, you've just helped me realize it's like once you know the rules, then what gets really exciting is when you see somebody completely like just run through the rules completely, throw them out the window. And you're right. You can do that infinite times.
Or even just once you know a lot, then you pick up on like the little nuances of like the Jack U snare back in the day, like that you were like, what is this snare? This is so like, what is this snare? And that was like, to me, when I heard that song, like the most standout thing was like, this snare sounds so different. Yeah.
Yeah, that thing was so wild. And you're right too. Then it becomes a different conversation, right? Because then you're hearing all the little nuances and maybe the little tricks that a producer threw in only for another producer to pick up on, all the little stuff that goes in. I mean, it's interesting maybe talking about this idea through the lens of your own work, because I feel like when you first came out, you pretty quickly got associated with like the future bass movement and that label and that sound. I have no idea how much you wanted to be lumped into that, but I think you definitely were. And I guess either then or now, was there any of that of like, okay, we've established sort of ourselves in these parameters, but like, are we able to break out of these parameters if we wanted to?
Yeah, definitely. I think like some of our bigger songs, like as of late, like Better Not have done a good job kind of staying, like keeping a part of like the heart of Louis the Child, but like kind of maybe a new tempo and a new lead sound. And, you can kind of change and make things new if you kind of keep the integrity or like the heart and the character of who you are, you know what I mean? And you're not just completely random or like, chasing something, but it just feels authentic from the artist, and I think it's fun to try new things and to try new tempos and try, to experiment and come up with something that is exciting to you. And if it's exciting to you as an artist, it'll probably resonate with the people who liked, other, the original stuff that you put out or whatever. But, I think the way we see Louis the Child is like a vibrant, happy, bubbly, positive energy, and then kind of extending that into different kind of stylistic kind of boundaries, like what you were talking about, kind of make it match a different set of stylistic rules or something.
Yeah, and I feel like even from the very beginning, even before anyone had really heard of us, we were always making like different sounding stuff. Like it wasn't like we found, we're always at this tempo and this sort of pocket and these drums, and the drops are always this with a vocal chop or something. I feel like we were always making a bunch of different stuff, and like Fred said, more focused on like sort of like the feeling of it, and not like it has to be these specific constraints, but like it's got to feel like what Louis the Child feels like. I don't think we've ever really felt like we've been like super boxed into, one sound.
Yeah, it sounds like you've at least had an idea of the direction or the vibe you wanted to take it for a long time, which is good, because I think, especially once you do start getting associated with a certain sound or movement or any of that, there can be a lot of external pressure, even if it's just from something like internet comments or whatever, to, not really stray too far out of the box. And I don't know, I think a lot of artists have some trouble with that somewhere along the way, in terms of like, even if you know what you want to do, I think it can get just sort of disorienting after a while of like, wait, are we still on that track that we wanted to be on,
Yeah. But also I feel like future bass, like that sort of label applied to a lot of different tempos, at least. Yeah. Like if you make, house music, you're kind of really confined to like one small tempo range. And, if all of a sudden you start making stuff at like 98, people are going to be like, this doesn't sound like house music, but I feel like there was future bass stuff that was at 140 or 150. And then also stuff that was at 84 BPM and stuff that was at 92 and 96 or whatever. And like, it gave you a lot more space, at least from a tempo standpoint, to play around.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think, at least for me, I don't know if you guys would agree, but I was listening back to a lot of your older catalog, as well as, all the new singles from the upcoming album. To me, there's like this kind of indie mindset to a lot of it. It's not that you're not going for like pop choices, because I think a lot of your songs are quite poppy, but it's more like not going for necessarily the first most obvious choice. There's like just a little bit of like a weirdness or a twist or, something unexpected that I really like, that I think has been pretty present in all of your guys' work. I don't know. It made me think of, this is kind of random, but it made me think of a lot of Australian producers that I really love, and a lot of like the Australian indie dance bands from, maybe a decade or so ago, where it was like pop music, but just kind of through this odd specific lens. Does that connect at all for you?
Definitely.
Totally. Yeah.
I feel like we're inspired by a lot of indie music too, especially back when we were first starting out.
Yeah, I'm definitely not, a huge just kind of pop style music in general, and you grew up listening to a lot of indie bands and things like Modest Mouse and Modest Mouse was one of my favorites for sure. And I was just listening or it's total tangent, but I was listening on the way here to like a Float On like mashup with Not Like Us, and it actually worked so well.
Man.
I was like, honestly, this is a vibe. But
I love that we're kind of in an era where the mashup is back. Like for a while, I feel like mashups were kind of looked at as like the lowest form of anything, and now there's kind of back in style, which I love, because I've always loved mashups. But it's funny how the stuff kind of bubbles back up.
Yeah, totally. I feel like TikTok played so much into that. Like people want to hear things together, hear different things together, put two trends together that shouldn't belong together or something.
Yeah. But no, we're definitely indie fans, and like Bon Iver, and we love Dijon as well. He's been really amazing, and Mickey is a guitarist and producer. But definitely see things through an indie light, and aren't just going for what's gonna be the most streams. It's more of like does this match a feeling, or does this like kind of feel right to me, and not trying to just boil it down to a science, but always, experiment and try to find like a new, fresh way to like use, classic music theory as a baseline of, okay, now what rhythms do you play? What melody do you play? Like, and kind of just slowly get to a spot where it just feels like the puzzle pieces are right, and not just kind of, okay, this instrumentation worked on Ed Sheeran's song and that did really well, so we're going to do that again. Right. Trying to find something new.
Do you guys have like prescribed roles you play in the studio? Like, does one person more often handle one part of the production and another person handle something else?
Somewhat. It's kind of free, but a lot of the time I'll be playing instruments and feeding it into like Rob's computer for him to kind of manage the project file, and I'll add a bunch of different parts for different sections, and then once there's an idea in there, then everyone kind of Rob will play a bass line for it and add synths, and then I'll add more, and it's kind of everyone's doing something at once. It's kind of nice.
I feel like as people in general, I'm very like organized and can see things from a like kind of bird's eye view and look at music that way. And Freddie's very good at like focusing in on something and really like getting to the granular details. And I feel like we kind of operate that way a good amount in the studio, where like Brad can really lock in and just like go crazy with EQing stuff, and I can kind of sit back and be like, wait, just take that thing out of there and move that thing over there, and it's good.
That's good. I mean, were you able to kind of just fall into that? Because that's sort of the ideal workflow you'd want out of like a partnership, right?
I guess so, yeah. I feel like we did kind of fall into that. And I also feel like, especially if we're like with with like some writers or like writing with an artist, I feel like I drift more towards songwriting and Freddie will drift more towards production. And then even between us in terms of like doing production and like live stuff, because I come from more of like the DJing mashup world and Freddie comes from more of the production world, I feel like we still kind of lean more towards those sides where like I can kind of put together like a good set list, but then Freddie can go in and make this old song sound way different and produce, new things that then I go, okay, that fits here and that fits there in the show, and we should combine this with that or something. So I feel like we take on those roles a little bit within live versus production.
Hey man, I mean, sometimes it just works and you don't have to think about it. If you got that, that's fantastic. Cause I think a lot of people struggle to even define those roles, in like a creative partnership.
Yeah. But we don't strictly say like, you got to do this or you got to do that.
Of course.
It just kind of a lot of times naturally happens.
It's interesting too, like talking about the collaborations you guys do, because you've collaborated with tons and tons of excellent creative people. Has that evolved as well? Because I think you guys are clearly very good at working with a lot of different people who make a lot of different sounds, come from a lot of different places, have different perspectives. Was that something you had to learn along the way too? Or was that another thing that kind of just you organically felt it out as you went?
Yeah, we definitely kind of like learned the songwriting process by working with a lot of really great songwriters right at the start of our career. Cause, shopping around for publishing and when you're doing that, they'll set you up in different sessions and also through our management, people like John Ryan and Amar Malik. Definitely like working with Amar, like you just see like the creative wheels going, and it's kind of like I took philosophy in high school, and then it's just like a million different ideas and everything's right. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just like creatively, like everyone's throwing something into the room, and you see what could work for a possible storyline or like what the point is of the song, and then figuring out good melodies, and then kind of just step by step arriving at creating this song
And all like the 145 guys, like we had a good group of like producer, writer homies, like Ahmad Royal and Blaze Rayleigh and Roger Shahayed. When we like first came out to LA, like Freddie met Ahmad just like on the internet, right? Mm-hmm. And then
through SoundCloud.
Yeah. And then when we would come out to LA, you know, we'd like stay at their crib. They all like live together and kind of like work with them. I feel like that was some of the early moments for me of like seeing how just like sometimes just observing them like all like coming up with stuff together and seeing like, oh, this is kind of how it works. Like people throw out ideas. Everyone, you know, you should be very like accepting of anything and like, you know, be open to people changing things and be very free flowing with stuff and just keep going.
Yeah, I love Ahmad. I've known him for a while. He's a great dude.
Yeah, he's the best. Yeah. I love him.
The ray of sunshine.
yeah, he really just a positive presence. That's absolutely right. Totally. I mean, what about like in terms of working with other producers? I mean, we could maybe use this to talk about Believe It with Madeon, who, I mean, you mentioned obviously you met each other at a Madeon concert, so that's just a cool full circle moment. But what is, you know, working with him, is it a similar thing where you kind of watch how somebody else produces, see how, you know, see their creative process and see how you can sort of mesh with that?
Well, with that, with Believe It specifically, that was like a unique case where he wanted us to just show him a bunch of projects that we've been working on or beats that we had, and he would just write, and we would all write together the song. So we've worked with him a few times, and that was the only time we didn't like start a beat with him and you know, go from the ground up. And it worked really well because, you know, it's kind of you're set up to just focus on the songwriting and not kind of be constructing both the production and the songwriting all at once. And with all of us being mainly producers, it's nice to be able to kind of separate the two, I think. And it was super free flowing and just kind of, it was interesting. We just like started off with like, okay, let's not care if these words make sense, but let's make it just sound good and we can edit whatever doesn't make sense and then make it make sense at the end. So it was kind of just, you know, a step past, you know, just the mumble take, but a full, you know, like random words that just phonetically sound good. And then, we kind of slowly built more of a storyline on that.
And we kind of knew going into it, like, I feel like we did a lot of like just sitting and like listening to it. And because once we like had a playlist of stuff, and once we kind of picked the one that we're like, this, we all feel really good about this one. It was like, let's pitch it up, let's pitch it down, let's speed it up, let's slow it down, like playing around with just that first. And then, like really honing in on the songwriting. And we knew early on that like, we were like, let's not make it a very like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus song. Like, let's try and write like a couple lines that are really, really great. And then maybe do like a verse in the middle and then have those couple great chorus lines again and like make it really simple and try and like not write more than we need to get a point across. And it was really interesting because he works in FL and we work in Ableton. So sometimes just watching someone use a different DAW and seeing them do the same things that you do, but just in a different way. It was so interesting. He wouldn't record any vocals to a click or anything. He would like just sing them out loud and then go in and stretch, you know.
That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Or he'd be like, okay, Fred, can you say that thing again? Everyone be quiet. He'd say it and then he'd be like, okay, cool. And run it through his crazy chain and then just like kind of stretch it around. He's the only person I've ever seen who's done that, who like would just sing it to nothing.
That's interesting. I mean, the song Believe It, like, of course, has sort of that old like French touch, French house, disco house feel to it. And so much of that music, like the roots of that music were based off like old samples. I wonder, not necessarily that this is what he meant to do, but I would imagine doing something like that to his own voice kind of makes it a little more like a sample, right? Where you're actually warping it around, making it fit another tempo or another style. Like maybe there's just a little touch of weirdness that gets injected, some artifact or some stretching. Because overall, like it does have that sort of nostalgic vibe to it, I think.
I hadn't thought about that, but you make a good point.
Working with him, it's got to be bizarre when you met each other more or less as children at his show. Like, is that the kind of thing where over time you just get to know him and you're friends with him and it just makes sense? Or do you have those moments of like, what the fuck is happening? Like, how this doesn't make any sense? You know what I mean?
We had like a lot of those moments when we first started touring with him. We opened and stayed on his bus and like a long time ago now. Like having that moment was the real like, oh my gosh, like can you believe this? And then the first few times working with him, it's a little anxious because you look up to him so much. And then at this point, it's kind of just like, super easy and less anxious for sure.
Was he the first person to take you guys on tour in like a major way?
Yeah. It was our first time like riding on a tour bus, was with him. And first time being like, we're going on tour with this person, not we're
How
opening up.
How old were you guys at that point, approximately?
Probably 15 or so.
We were older
16?
than that. We were probably
16, probably 16. Because we get out of high school at 18.
I'd say 17 and 18 is probably how old we were.
Yeah.
Something
but still,
like that.
I mean, high school age, like junior, senior year. It's so wild to think about. I mean, do you have, like, if you think back about it now, are there certain images or moments that spring to mind, like anything that sort of runs on a loop in the back of your head every once in a while in terms of just memories of that tour? Like not necessarily the craziest thing that happened, but just kind of something that stuck with you.
There was one day, I remember, actually two things come to mind with this specific day. We were playing in Boise, and that day he like during sound check let us like kind of play around with his launch pads and like pulled up like the pop culture, launch pad. And that's like impossible to play if you don't know like the rhythm of how to hit the buttons. But like, just like being up there and being like, I'm in his setup, like playing drums on the launch pad was like, I remember that being like a really like, what the fuck moment. And then later that night afterwards, like we all just watched like Back to the Future, I think 1 and 2, because I think Hugo had never seen Back to the Future or something. And I just, for some reason, that always stands out to me. It was like, I think we watched like the first one in like the green room and then watched the second one like on the back of the bus. And for some reason that like always stuck with me watching Back to the Future together.
Oh, I love that.
And then I remember, that's one of them, the Back to the Future night on the bus. And then another one was, I think it was in maybe Boise or something. There was like a big like antique store that had tons of pianos and organs and stuff. And we all just went in and were jamming in the middle of the day. It was just kind of super fun. A bunch of these old antique pianos and organs that we were jamming on.
Because the venue was in a strip mall, which was so weird.
That sounds about right for Boise. I feel like. That
was a hell of a day on tour in Boise. We played the launch pads. We jammed the pianos. We watched Back to the Future.
And big day. That's like the perfect day. I love that. Because it's really, I mean, at this point, you know more than anyone. You tour long enough, and it's like it is those moments that end up being the most meaningful. Not that the shows aren't amazing and you don't put your heart into it and all that. Obviously, you do that, but it really is kind of those the in between moments where just like you get a little bit of something you wouldn't have otherwise experienced, right?
Totally.
I mean, you guys, I'm a little all over the place with this, but it makes me think of, you announced these like Day in the Sun parties. Where are you at in general with touring and with live shows? Because I feel like you've kind of run the gamut of like what those experiences can be. What's the ideal touring situation for you guys at this point? Like, as far as being on the road a lot, a little, choosing your spots, big venues, small venues.
It's interesting. I feel like to talk about A Day in the Sun a little bit, like that was definitely like a yearning to do something kind of different and out of the box, which I feel like we're in a really great place for live dance music right now, because I feel like people are really seeking something different, and people were kind of living in sort of the era of like the pop-up and, performing in unusual places or at unusual times or in a, like 360 sets, or like everyone's, doing them and fans love them. So I feel like we're in a great place in terms of like production wise. I don't feel like it doesn't feel like we, the same, like more lights, more video, more everything. It's more like do nothing and put it in a cool place, and get the crowd close to you and give people this dope energy. So that's where a lot of that feeling came from. And I don't think we're even going to be doing like a big video screen or anything for the daytime shows. We kind of want to focus more on like almost like more like set design and making it all look really interesting and kind of unique for a daytime show. But in terms of like the ideal setup for touring in general now, like I've always been a fan of like the bus tour and going and being like, for these 5-6 weeks, we're playing 4 or 5 nights a week. And, I sleep really well on the bus. You get to sleep the whole time that you travel. And then you go and you hit all these places. You have this awesome experience and you get real close with all the artists that are with you and your crew. And then you go off and you chill for a bit and you stay totally in a music headspace. I kind of like jumping from like, I'm fully in this touring to I'm fully in music production and I'm not thinking about tour. But right now we're kind of in this state of like doing a lot of weekend shows and A Day in the Sun. You can't really get people to leave their jobs on a Thursday or a Wednesday to go see you perform. So they're all like Saturday shows. Yeah, I'd like to get back to doing like a full bus run at some point, but we gotta find the right time to do that.
Yeah, I think that's tough, especially sort of ironically as you get more and more successful and the whole machine gets a little bigger. It's like sometimes hard to like find the week where you should go play Omaha, right?
Yeah.
Totally. What about but you, Fred? That being said, Omaha rules, and it's like, at least for me as a performer, it's like those are always the most fun shows. It's like the town you wouldn't expect.
Those random city, like little cities, and in those random little states. Well, not random, but the not very popular ones.
Yeah, the overlooked ones. I don't want anyone listening to think I'm talking shit here, because like those are my favorite places to go. But it's just the way the industry moves, it can be harder to get out there.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we should talk a little bit more about the album. I guess through that, maybe this is a good way to connect it, is sort of through that lens of like, you've done a lot of different touring setups. You've experienced a lot. You kind of know your preferences a little bit. You've also released music in a lot of different ways. For this album, For the Sun Comes Up, I almost hate that I'm asking this because it's sort of a corny interview question, but like, is there something about this album that feels significantly different from other releases that you've done? Whether it's musically, whether it's where you're at in your lives, whether it's just your mindset at the time. Does it feel like this is a new chapter, or does it feel more like this is a continuation of what we've been working on?
It definitely feels like a slight evolution, but we've had a few projects come out as of late that seem like a diversion from the Louis the Child sound. And I would say this is more what you would expect, but at the same time, there is an evolution of trying to make it more dance focused and more electronic. Whereas I would say something like Here for Now leaned maybe towards the indie or alternative side, and then had some like Better Not and some dance moments and some future bass moments, but definitely leaned more towards the indie side. And this project's definitely going to be more higher energy and more dance focused, and but still definitely the bubbly, like indie, synth hoppy Louis kind of sound that you would expect at the same time. But yeah, I think there's nothing on it that feels like just a direct, the same exact style as something like It's Strange or Better Not.
Yeah. And I, to be clear, was not trying to say that was even a possibility,
no,
but yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. Oh, no.
But was that, where you ended up with it, was that an intentional choice of like, this is what we want to focus on? Or was it kind of just, I'm making music that sounds like this, let's kind of lean into where our head's at?
Little bit of both. I mean, we usually like start to decide the vibe of a project based around songs that we've been making. So kind of, it was a little bit of both, kind of having the songs in the arsenal that fit the vibe, and then also wanting to continue to make that type of stuff. But then we still at the same time tried to vary every single song and make it each song feel a little bit more unique, or just unique compared to the others, and have their own, unique qualities or different tempos and different maybe stylistic choices, but still kind of falling into the same energy and the same kind of feeling.
Yeah. I feel like also we, before writing this album, we spent like a whole month writing like a totally different project that was like a whole hip hop album that was very like soul sampley, like early Kanye sounding stuff, and like really tapped, like we were rapping on it, and like we were really like tapping into writing about our childhood and Chicago, and like, early memories of even doing Louis the Child was like, telling those stories in the lyrics. And I feel like through doing that, at least for me personally, I think there was like a subconscious like reconnection with like sort of the energy of like early Louis the Child days, and that feeling and the sounds that I was into at the time. And I feel like we did tap back into a little bit of like sort of the early Louis the Child sound, but with, 8 years more experience performing and writing songs and new technology and all of that. So I think there was some of that like subconsciously seeping into writing this, and just being re-stoked on electronic music as a whole since coming out of the pandemic. I feel like when we wrote Here for Now, I wasn't as stoked on the state of electronic music as a whole. Now that I'm like kind of re-stoked on it, you want to make cool dance music because it feels like the scene is really like in a healthy place.
That makes total sense. Was that hip hop project, was that originally going to be something else? Like, was it an intentional plan for it? Or was it kind of just like, this is a fun thing we're working on with no agenda?
It was an intentional plan. We played it for our label, and they were kind of like, I don't know, guys. Like, this is really awesome. You guys really did this sound justice, but like, you've been a dance act forever, and like, I don't know if this is totally gonna land, and it's gonna be a lot of work to like get this heard in the same way. And we're like, all right, maybe we pause that for a second and shift gears and try something else. And then through trying something else, we ended up where we are now and made something that I think is also really fucking awesome.
I mean, I think there's a good lesson in that for a lot of like up and coming artists listen to this too. And I think that's a really good lesson, is that to not get too attached to an outcome on your creative projects and just to, it's like the cliche that we all know, but to be in the moment as much as possible when you're creating, to just do what you're excited about. And then what happens afterwards? What am I trying to say? Regardless of whether it's what you thought was going to come out of it, if you're in the moment, if you're sort of pouring your energy into your creativity, something good is on the way, even if it's not something you can see at the time.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? That project might come out one day or might not, but just the act of making it and putting ourselves in that headspace of talking about growing up in Chicago and thinking about these memories and being re-inspired on basically, like thinking about memories of being like 9 years old and throughout from then on, you know what I mean? And just like it really connects you back with yourself and who you are. And, it definitely felt like a cathartic kind of experience to just kind of go back through all that stuff. And whether or not it comes out doesn't really matter because, it just makes you feel more connected to yourself, which is, I think, a good thing.
100%. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so hard to even take stock of it. I was thinking about this earlier when I knew we were coming to talk, which is that, you guys started getting attention and success pretty young. And so in a sense, like as your project was growing up, you guys were also growing up as humans at the same time. And I think, not that it's hard to do, but I wonder if there's those moments where you're like, wait, is this growth that I'm experiencing as an artist? What does this have to do with my growth as a human? And, how do I adjust to sort of growing up as a person in the world while I'm also trying to grow up as an artist? Like, what was any of that happening back in the day?
Like, was any of that happening?
In terms of just like, feeling like people are expecting me to sort of be a professional artist, but maybe I don't even feel like I'm a professional human yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, Rob still doesn't cook yet.
I still don't feel like I'm a professional human, at all.
Yeah, no, it's, everyone grows at their own pace and learns different things, and you got to have your, it takes a long time to build all the skills of just being an adult, you know what I mean? And let alone your job. And within music, there's just a crazy number of skills you have to have as well. Just being an artist, it's not just playing one instrument, and it's not just producing cool sounds. There's so many different philosophical, deeper elements to making music, and then our things like design and things like then having community building skills and stuff like that, engaging an audience. There's just so many different things wrapped into it. And then there's, all the other things that don't matter as much for your job, but are important, just like relationship management and random other things outside of music. So yeah, you shouldn't feel bad about wherever you're at, and just keep, moving, getting closer.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's funny because I was looking at some older interviews from you guys, doing a little research to come talk to you. And I found one from around the time that It's Strange with K-Flay blew up. And this must have been like a couple years afterwards. And you were just talking about the experience of that song and, all of a sudden getting all this attention. And it was a thrown off thing. I don't even know who said it, but one of you guys said, we put in a lot of work at that time to get that song to as many people as possible and to get it heard by as many people as possible. And so kind of what you were just talking about, Freddie, like the sort of background work that people don't see, that there's always more you could be doing. I was just sort of curious, like back in those days, like, what was that work? Like, what were you spending your time on back then before there were all of these sort of...
Oh my, it was a lot more simple back then.
It was, yeah. It actually was, it was a lot, yeah. I feel like easier to, as long as your music was good, the tools were very easy back then. Like we quickly learned, through our manager, that like Hype Machine was like the way to get a lot of people to hear your stuff. And so we went through and like created a list of all the Hype Machine blogs, all the emails associated with those blogs, people's first names. I would go in and like look at what songs were big on Hype Machine and then be like, all right, every big Hype Machine song is getting posted by like, there's like these 7 blogs that are all, helping get these songs to chart on Hype Machine. For those listening who don't know what Hype Machine is, real quick, it was kind of like, it was like the Billboard chart for what's popular on music blogs. And you could go on there and you could just play starting from the number 1 song and just play through. And then you could go and look at what the article said about that song. And if you played through stuff on Hype Machine, then those plays would count towards your SoundCloud plays. So we amassed this list of like 700, 800 blogs. And also like we would like trade lists with other artists and stuff. And then when we would release a song, like I would go and I would individually send out like 700 emails and put in the person's name but then we would also make the emails like kind of fun and like interesting and like maybe put like a meme in there or something, or like, if it was like March Madness or something, I'd take a bunch of like GIFs of like March Madness moments or something and be like, the song will make you say, and then a GIF or something, like made them like fun and interesting emails to even read, which I feel like helped a blogger say, I want to listen to this. This was a funny email. And so with It's Strange, that was another case of like, we had been doing that with a lot of the songs leading up to then. And that was helping us get a lot of people to hear our music. And then It's Strange, we still did that, and then we got like 20 different friends to remix it and put out this giant remix pack. But I think the biggest moment that happened with It's Strange was Taylor Swift posted about it. And that really I feel like kind of took it to that whole other level. It was also in FIFA. That did a lot for it.
Right. But I mean, it's funny, those things
years
you
of
can't
sending
plan.
hundreds of emails.
That's what I was going to say, is like those things you can't plan for, like Taylor Swift posting about your song. It's sort of what we were talking about earlier with the hip hop project leading to this new album, where you were putting in all this work to just get it out there. And then you don't know what the eventual outcome is going to be. And in this case, it was Taylor Swift posting about your song. But that doesn't happen without sort of you laying all that groundwork beforehand, I would say. Totally.
I don't think she would have ever heard that song if we hadn't spent years getting these remixes. And it was mostly remixes we were putting out on Hype Machine. Because It's Strange was kind of like felt like our first real original song.
I mean, are you able to, I'm always curious for people who have had at least a few hits under their belt. We were talking about Better Not before, we're talking about It's Strange. Are you able to identify something about the songs that are going to take off in the moment? Do you know in the time, this is special, there's something happening here?
I felt that for Better Not, for sure.
If you connect with it, that's the most important thing. But you really never know. You really never know how it's going to perform. You might love a song as much as possible, and then it doesn't do as well as something like Better Not. But I would say no one knows how a song's gonna do. But the goal is to love every one that you put out. For your own personal reasons, and let it do what it will, kind of vibe.
Yeah. And like you said, there's so many things that can happen and do happen once a song is out that you just can't predict or plan. You can't predict what song, if a song is going to end up in a Apple commercial, or if it's gonna a pop star is gonna post about it, or nowadays if like a famous TikToker is gonna do a dance to it or something. Like you can't.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff you just can't predict. But if you make great music, there's a chance that something crazy could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it makes me want to ask about the writing credit that you have on "Closer" by the Chainsmokers too, because that's another. Yeah. I'd just be curious, like, because I don't really have any of that background. Like, what was that experience like writing on that song? And sort of similar to what we were just talking about, could you tell anything about that song at the time? Because if you want to talk about like insane hits that you've been involved in, that's right up there.
Totally. Yeah, no, that was a really fun one. We were on tour with the Chainsmokers at the time. We were still in high school, and Rob couldn't make it to this one show for some reason.
I had a test. I was in college. I had a test the next day.
Oh, Jay.
Beautiful.
My parents wouldn't let me go to Chicago for a show.
Yeah, so it was in Champaign, Illinois. And so it was after the show, and we were hanging out in the green room, and then Drew's just like, should we go make some beats? And then went and made beats in the back of the tour bus until like 4 a.m. or something. And we made it. We just made the beat that night, and it was a lot of fun to make. And I knew it was a well made beat, but I had no clue what it was going to turn into. But we had the full like production done that like is on the final track without any words on it. And then I don't think I ever heard the songwriting until I was at Coachella and heard the Chainsmokers play it live. So it was kind of funny. I was like, wait, I think this is the beat I made. And it dropped. And I'm like, no, this is definitely the one. And Halsey's up there dancing. I'm like, Halsey's on this song. So
I mean, it's interesting. Sorry, not to cut you off, but just like that moment of hearing it in the crowd, realizing it's something you made months ago, just having fun with people you were touring with. You mentioned earlier, like there's deeper philosophies that can underpin like creative work, writing music. What does that mean for you guys? Like, do you think about sort of like the more spiritual side of making music in terms of like, is it about getting into a flow state? Is it about being a vessel? Is it about executing an idea? Like it could be anything, but I'm always curious for people who have made a lot of different stuff successfully like you guys have and seem to still be like excited to do it. Like what is that drive? What is that force for you guys?
I think it's like on one hand, it's just like and really enjoying like when a melody and the words just come together to like hit that emotion or scratch some sort of itch that it's hard to say what the itch is, but it just kind of like resonates. On one hand it might be storytelling, and then on another hand, there is a spiritual element of it where it's with something like Better Not, where like what do we want to make the crowd feel, and like what do we let's talk directly to the listener, and what kind of message do we want to be spoken, in like a live kind of setting where everyone's just outdoors and listening to music and like, looking at beautiful visuals and kind of dancing and stuff. So it's kind of like, what do we want to be said in like a time like that? Or like what, there's sometimes you want to get real specific with it and tell the crowd something, or like, I think with each song though, it's kind of like, okay, there's an intention. How do we express that? Or maybe it's just an emotion, and you're trying to just make this song feel like true love or something like that, or like the feeling of like floating above the clouds or something. Like you might just have an idea for like, the snow falling in a parking lot in Chicago, and like make like when we made It Strange, like that beat, I had like an image of we had just gone to like Walgreens to get some like Frappuccino, like the ones that are in the fridge. And
the Starbucks ones. Yeah.
On the way home, it was like super beautiful snowing. And like you just take a picture of like a moment like that and try to like put that feeling into the beat you go home and write. And, you know, it's just kind of about expressing that mood, and then having that mood underlying the song, or like to write to. It just kind of makes it a lot easier, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know if I feel like I totally identify with that, like feeling like being a vessel, you know, but I do identify with kind of being an observer. And I feel like a lot of times I do feel like my role in a room is like observing and like being able to like identify a moment when it happens. You know, when someone does something interesting, being able to like use my ears really well and say that, right, that's the hook right there, you know, and piecing that stuff together. There is a bit of like your soul feeling very full when you create something that you're really proud of, or something that just feels really great. You know, there's like, it's like a high that you get when you create something and you feel really, really good about it, and it's all you want to listen to. You know, it's interesting as a musician, you get these like extreme highs and extreme lows. You know, there's days where you're like, I suck at this. I've just got lucky so many times, you know. But then there's other days where you're like, I'm the best at this, and I'm so like, thank God for me. I like, you know,
yeah.
Where like, you know, you make some, or like you just have that high of like, you play something back and you're like, this did not exist this morning. Like, that is so cool. You know, I feel like there's a lot of chasing that high as a musician, and having that, yeah, like I said, your soul feeling very full and like, yes, I'm doing right in this world.
Man, I mean, I relate to a lot of what you guys just said. That thing about sort of being the observer, I think a lot of creative people can relate to that idea. In a way, it's weird because you feel like you're sort of outside of real life, or like outside of the moment, taking it all in. But then through creating something, and I'm just speaking for myself now, but it's like, if you want to get to know me, like I can express myself almost better that way, creating something, than if you just talk to me. You know what I mean? And there's something very fulfilling about that too, where you're like, oh, I've found a way to like feel more myself than even just sort of existing as a person in the world. And I don't know, at least for me, I've sort of come to that realization where I'm like, oh yeah, this is maybe why this feels so good, is because it's not only that I'm like creating something cool that I'm excited about, but it's also like, oh no, this is actually maybe a better representation of me than like I am myself, you know?
Yeah. Or a song can kind of explain how you felt in a moment better than you could explain it with words.
Totally.
Exactly. You know?
Totally. Yeah. And it's, even those moments, because you can't hold on to the moment, right? Like all we have is like the present moment. You can remember it, but memories are faulty. And so, there's definitely that satisfaction of like, oh no, I captured that feeling. Yeah, it's almost like you broke the laws of nature in a way, you know?
Yeah. And it's cool. Like music can really, whether you've made the song or you just had an experience, or a song soundtrack's a part of your life, like music, I feel like more than any other art form, for me at least, has the power to really like transport you back to certain times in your life. You know, I can hear a song and be like totally brought back to a specific moment, and I reconnect with like, oh, I was feeling this at this time, and I was friends with this person, and I was doing this a lot, doing that a lot. Like, I don't know, music's really, really interesting in that way.
I completely agree. And then it's like, wow, I get to actually participate in that too. Like there's something about that when I really pull back, I'm like, oh man, I just lucked out that I can do this at all, you know?
One of my like favorite things to think about, or like a realization that I had years ago that like still to me is like one of the coolest things in the world is like the thought that something that we've already created or something that we're going to create in the next year. So like, for instance, like some song on this album that we're about to put out, there will be someone that isn't even born yet that will be obsessed with at least one of these at some point in their life. Like some person that hasn't even been conceived yet is one of these songs is going to soundtrack some moment of their life, or they're going to connect with one of these songs in the same way that I connect with Helmet by Steve Lacy. And I know what that song means to me in the moment that is. Like that to me is the coolest thing. Like both that someone living has experienced that with our music already, and that someone who isn't even alive yet will experience that to something that we've created. It's bound to happen.
It's funny because there's a question I used to ask at the end of each one of these interviews. I don't really do it anymore, but since you brought it up and we're talking about it, like I used to end every single episode of this podcast asking people about like a random access memory of just like a time in their life when music really made an impact, left a memory, was associated with, you know, just something random where you're like, oh, I think about this song playing when I was driving over this bridge a lot. Or, you know, oh, I saw this concert and I remember this one moment for some reason. Even that song you just mentioned, like, do you have any of those that kind of just pop up into your head from time to time?
Yeah, that song, Helmet by Steve Lacy, always brings me back to, I went on a solo trip in Greece probably 2 years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago now. And my first time really traveling alone for an extended period of time in a foreign country. And, you know, for anyone who's traveled alone somewhere, you know, there's times where it's really freeing and you're like, I just do whatever I want. And there's times where you're really lonely and you're like, I wish someone else was here. And you kind of feel a little awkward doing it. But I just remember I was in Athens and it was right after that album had come out, and I was listening and like I had already listened to the album like once at home and I didn't 100% connect with it. I was like, it's dope, but I don't know, you know? And then I was out there and I was like, let me run that Steve Lacy album again. And like that song came on while I was taking this walk through Athens, like right around the Acropolis. And like, I could still see like the white kind of like marble ground and the staircase that I was walking up, and like this feeling of like, man, this feels dope. Like I'm just out here doing my thing. Like I'm in my own world right now, just like doing what I please on my own in Greece. Like this thing right here is thousands of years old. This is crazy, you know? Yeah, that song always brings back that memory.
I love that, man, because that's there's a lot in that, because that's a song that somebody else made a long time ago gives you that moment. You now get to give other people that moment, and you know you're in like a place that means so much for human history. Yeah, I don't know. Music, it is special that way. It can heighten all of those moments and really give you that awareness. And yeah, that's beautiful. You have anything like that, Freddie?
Seeing Rusko at Lollapalooza, I think I was probably like 13 or 14, and somehow got separated like from my parents in the crowd, and then
somehow got separated.
Maybe I snuck away. I don't know. But
we'll never know.
But then I was just a little kid, so I was, walked up to the security and asked if I could, stand backstage right here, point somewhere close by, and they let me go there, and just kind of seeing the crowd at that time going crazy for the dubstep that I was a huge fan of, and being downtown Chicago, and just this daytime really happy energy, and just I don't know, growing up, sneaking away from my parents, finding my way backstage, just kind of finding my way to something cool, and appreciating that moment. But then there's also, a few times that come to my mind, like, Spring Awakening, when me and Rob played the first 1 or 2 times, just kind of like standing up and, at side stage, like in the full like soldier field where you're like on the field and like looking at this crazy crowd for, I don't remember if it was like Calvin Harris or we definitely saw Calvin Harris there, but just a lot of great memories over the years, and nothing too specific of a story, but just, lots of great memories.
Yeah. And again, I think that goes to sort of the spiritual thing too, of like, there's a lot I like about those stories, but it's like sort of being there, seeing music you were already into, but then also realizing that like what it's doing is connecting all these people, building this energy, uniting this energy that otherwise wouldn't have been there. Another like special superpower, if you want to call it that, of like this weird thing that we do, man. It's pretty
Totally.
Cool. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. I feel like that's a pretty good note to wrap it up on.
Yeah. Making music, guys. Making music.
Go to show.
It's pretty cool. That's like the new slogan for making music.
Make music.
Just in general.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Why do you make music?
Well,
it's pretty cool. It's like a really like shitty ad from like our childhood.
Yeah.
Like a got milk type ad, or like a verb. It's what you do.
Make music. It's pretty cool.
It's like the, just say no to drugs, like the DARE program. I feel like that's the level of like connecting with the youth we're on right now.
Yeah. Or they're like, even my teacher makes music. And it's like the teacher being like, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Man,
Make music. It's pretty cool.
it's pretty cool. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you guys taking the time. This was super fun. I hope you had a good time.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we did.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
you making the time as well.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, that's it. We're done. Thanks, guys.
Sweet.
All right.
Appreciate it, man.
Great
Have a
talking.
good rest of your day.
Yeah,
Hope to see
you
you
too.
out there somewhere along the way.
Absolutely. Take care, guys. Peace.
Bye.
You too.